Hey everyone, this is Casey and Brimmer. I use they, them pronouns, and today, rewind. My name is Dr. Casey and Brimmer. I keep forgetting that part today. My name is Dr. Casey and Brimmer. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a queer gender and sexuality studies educator of more than 20 years with multiple disabilities who is also multiply queer. Care to introduce yourself, my friend?
Yeah, my name is Bob Ierien. I am a Lutheran pastor. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm just another bonehead on the bus trying to figure out how to be a decent human in the world to my LGBTQIA plus siblings. And I'm fortunate to get to talk with one of my very best friends about how to do that.
Aw, I love that. Um, this episode, we're discussing the spectrum of welcoming people contingently as guests versus welcoming people as integral parts of the community who would be missed if they weren't there. We're going to talk a little bit about the Riddle Scale of Homophobia and Sara Ahmed's on being included. Um, and how do we create spaces where marginalized and minoritized people feel integral to our communities, not just, well, they're here, so we'll deal with it. Um, so my question to start with is, what does it mean to you to have who you are be welcomed, affirmed, or even nurtured?
Hmm. I think the first thought that comes to mind is um, the the varying levels of intimacy that are inherent in those. It's just like the first word that popped into my head because welcoming people. Like if I walk into the grocery store this afternoon, there'll be somebody standing there to say, "Welcome to Giant." You know, okay, I have been welcomed. That person knows nothing about me and doesn't need or want to know anything about me to say, "You're welcome here," right? Now, don't get me wrong, that's way better than saying get the hell out, but let's face it, it's a pretty low bar. Um, Moving to that next step of affirming means I have to know something about you before I can affirm it, right? I have to know something about who you are, and I have to invest myself and say that who you are is not just okay, right? Welcome means okay. But to affirm it means to say it's not just okay, it is valued and appreciated. And then, like, the next step is to invest further and say, you're not just valued and appreciated for who you are, but I want to invest my time, my energy, my emotional labor, etc., in nurturing and fostering and working for the well-being of who you are, right? That there's one, I need to know more about you as a person at each of those levels as we go deeper. And there's also a deeper level of investment in each of those, right? I I'm always amused when churches say everyone is welcome here. Okay, like that's a really low bar, man. Like everybody's welcome at 7-Eleven. I mean, everybody's welcome at Walmart, right? Um, Up to a certain point. As long as you're not trashing the place. I mean, I used to work at Walmart. It's really hard to get thrown out of there. It's really hard to not be welcome at Walmart. Um, that's an incredibly low bar. And I think for churches that want to be affirming communities, and I think for individuals who want to be affirming, for really, and I shouldn't just say for churches, for any organization that wants to be truly affirming, let alone nurturing, uh, there is that additional level of investment that's required to move through that spectrum.
For me to be welcomed into a space, it's the difference of you can come if you want versus I want you to come if you can. I want you to be here. Um, and what we're talking about in building affirming spaces and making affirmation a practice is not just on an individual level, but doing what we can to implement things ahead of time so that people aren't afterthoughts. So it's things like the first thing we're going to do at a church or at a building is shovel the ramp because everybody can use the ramp, but not everybody can use the stairs. We're going to make sure that the entrance everybody else can go in, disabled people can go in. It's accessible, right? And that and things like, okay, we have a men's room and a women's room. This one is a single occupancy bathroom. And unless law requires that we have a men's room and a women's room, regardless of their occupancy, like if it's single occupancy or not, we make that bathroom gender inclusive, right? Um, to affirm communities is to build it into our language. You're a pastor. And so when I think about churches, one of the things I think about is brothers and sisters. Oh, no, siblings. It's even
Not
shorter
hard.
than brothers and sisters.
Mhm.
Um, or building in y'all to our language instead of hey guys. Um, and to do the small things that we build in that welcoming from the very start of what we're doing. And we build spaces where we are actively seeking out ways to improve what we know so that we can better support others. And in nurturing people, I see it kind of very much like you do of it's not just who you are is wanted here and you are a part of our community. It's, excuse me, it's what can we do to make sure you continue to feel like you are wanted here and you are a part of our community? What can we do to help you grow, not only as a queer person, but as a whole human being, right? So seeing people as whole people while we recognize that our individual parts make up are very important. And we can't just say, well, I don't see Casey, or I don't see trans when I see Casey Ann, I just see Casey Ann. Well, if you don't see my transness, can you see my experience? Can you see why I'm afraid to use that gendered bathroom in public? Can you see why I get anxious when I hear a lot of like loud noises, yelling at my car that's covered in pride stickers? No, and you don't necessarily understand the happiness and calm when I realize, okay, maybe that excitement about my car wasn't a bad thing. Maybe it's they were excited to see that representation on the street. True story in a cookout parking lot. It scared the bejesus out of me. Um, so this welcomed, affirmed, and nurtured, these are part of a spectrum. And that's part of what we're talking about today. We're drawing from two frameworks, and the first is the Riddle Scale of Homophobia.
Can
And go ahead.
can we push pause there for 1 second? Just because as you were talking about sort of the difference between you can come if you want to versus I actively want you to come and be here, and you know the community is less if you're not a part of it. um just and I don't want to get into like splitting semantic hairs, but one of the ways that we have talked about that in church communities that I have been a part of is the difference between welcoming and inviting. Like, it's one thing to say all are welcome here, right? Like, everybody says all are welcome here. And, certainly lots of people have had the experience of walking into a church and finding out that all are welcome really means all are welcome, but not you, right? Um, And also there's to me a quantitative or a qualitative difference between saying everyone is welcome here and saying we specifically want you to be a part of this community. That's the inviting part, that um, you are invited, you are expected, we are saving you a seat because we are less than we could be and should be and want to be if you are not here with us. Um, and that kind of community, it's just something that I think about a lot, and something that I try to get across to folks in the church is the difference between being welcoming and being inviting. That inviting is sort of the next level, because you got to put yourself out of your way to actually go find the person and invite them.
Yeah, it's an active thing,
Right.
right?
Welcome can be a very passive thing.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the differences that we're talking about in this podcast are the difference between passive actions and active things that we can do. Um, I think part of it being a practice, something we put into practice, something we do, is that active aspect.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, it's the difference between, do no harm, which can be very passive, versus actively seek to reduce harm, prevent harm, mitigate harm, which again, it requires you to actually roll up your sleeves and get to work.
yeah, for sure.
It requires,
Uh,
I should say, requires me to roll up my sleeves and get to work.
yeah. I think about um, recently I went and visited your wife's church.
Mhm.
And my plan was to sit in the back and draw because I just wanted to hear Gretchen preach. Just wanted to get a baseline for what kind of preacher she was.
As
Because
one
somehow
does.
that's important to me as a non-Christian. Um, and someone had me sign the guest registry, and I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna go sit in the back and hide and draw and do my thing because that's how I process social situations, new social situations, especially in places like churches where I have been harmed, right? And I went in there knowing that I was welcome and I was safe. Gretchen ensured I knew that, right? Um, and then someone came up to me and was like, "Hey, my daughter didn't come to church today, and I was wondering if you wanted to come sit with me up front," which was really sweet. Um, Anxiety inducing because I just wanted to sit in the back and draw, and it's a lot less obvious that that's what I'm doing if I'm in the back. Um, but she kind of wouldn't take no for an answer either. And that was like double-edged sword, but it was really, you're a stranger here. You're different. Like we don't know you, but we want to. Um, and that it gave me anxiety in the moment because people and autism and anxiety
And in a church.
and in a church, right? Um, but retrospectively, as we're thinking about this topic, it made me feel that difference of what you're saying, welcomed and invited.
Mhm.
Um, and it was looking at it now, like literally as we're recording this episode, because I definitely hadn't thought about that before this conversation. Um, that was a positive thing for me, even though it was anxiety inducing at the moment. There are some things that are really positive in the world that cause us anxiety in the moment, but we don't necessarily regret them afterwards.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And certainly there have been in my life, as I have learned um, about the experience of people different from me, whether it's queer people or people of color or women or whoever, there have been times in all of those that have been anxiety producing for me, but my life is so much richer because of
Yeah.
that learning that the anxiety was worth it.
Yeah. I mean, even making this podcast causes me some anxiety. I'm afraid I'm going to let our audience down in some way. The imposter syndrome is
I've
real.
just accepted that I'm going to do that. So,
You're not, I don't, I think there's a risk for both of us to do that in some ways, right? I don't think it's inevitable, but I think there's a risk for it. And yet we do it anyways.
mhm.
Um, I tell my students, you can do hard things. You're worth the time it takes to do hard things. And it is perfectly okay to do hard things scared.
Absolutely.
And
And I think it's
basis
perfectly
with it.
okay to do hard things imperfectly. You know,
Yeah.
we do the best we can. And if we screw it up, if we let somebody down, we take that on board, we listen to it, we make amends for it to the best of our ability, and we try to do it better the next time. But if I limited myself to the things that I know I can do perfectly, I'd never get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, I mess that one up a lot. I get hurt getting out of bed all the time. I
Right? Just wait till you're my age. It gets
don't
harder.
need to. I don't need to. I've been in this body for 20 something years or for 30 something years, 20 of which has been ow. So I
Right.
feel um
So, and feel free to like shut me down or shut me up or whatever, but um another thought that kind of sparked for me when you were talking about, like things with the churches need to pay attention to, like, the siblings instead of brothers and sisters, and, y'all instead of you guys, and those kinds of things. Another thing that I have become very aware of because of conversations I've had with people in the compartment of the LGBTQIA plus community, especially my ace and arrow siblings, is for the love of all that is sacred and holy, can you not make your sweethearts dance the only fellowship event you do in February? Um, can you not, like, it's fine to do stuff for married couples, right? But
mhm.
can you also do stuff for single adults that are not set up as like dating
We're looking
mixers?
for intimate partners.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you do can you make sure that you are valuing me as a whole person, including the fact that I am a single adult person who's not looking for an intimate partner, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I got to be honest, and I'm not in any way comparing my experience with this to the experience of Ace and Arrow people, but I had a small taste of that in a congregation that I was a part of when I was in my early 20s in the Navy in Virginia. And the pastor, actually, we were having coffee one day and he said to me, "Look, I'll understand if you don't stay around here for very long." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "This church is going to love you and they're going to welcome you and they're going to have no idea what to do with you because you are 23 years old and single. And they haven't seen anybody like you in a long time. If you had a wife and 2.3 kids and a dog and a station wagon, they would know exactly what to do with you. They will not know what to do with you as a single adult person.
Yeah.
And so, by all means, I hope you will stay. But if you get to the point where you're just sort of tired of being the odd person out in the room, let me know because I know of a congregation where you might feel more nurtured and supported." And about 6 months later, I took him up on that because, yeah, they were lovely people and they certainly didn't mean any harm. But everything that I went to, I was the odd person out because I didn't have a spouse or a romantic partner with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Um,
I just thought of it as we've been talking that, we have a men's breakfast every month, and now one of my congregations has a ladies' lunch every month. Hmm, who are we unintentionally not inviting to the table with that?
what's your inclusion statement at those events? That's one of the things that I talk about, or plan to talk about later in the episode is how are we actively including things? So I'm a non-binary lesbian. I'm a non-binary like woman works sometimes, but not always. Um, and when I'm looking at events that are marked as like a women's tea dance, I look for their inclusion statement. Who is welcome in this space, right? So if it's anyone who's aligned with women's spaces, they have like specific language that I'll look for that I can't think of off the top of my head that makes me say, okay, I know I'm wanted there. I know that I can go there and at minimum be safe and not be kicked out, right? Um, so how we practice that inclusion and that welcome that we've already discussed comes into play with what you're talking about there. And it's something to talk to the congregation about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so I'm gonna backtrack and skip forward for a second. So I just want to give like this overview of what the Riddle scale is,
Mhm.
because I believe it's applicable to more than just homophobia. I think it can apply to every marginalized and minoritized group in some capacity. And so this scale is attitudes and characteristics of like people's level of being homophobic or heterosexist. Um, and so it starts with at a very low number, 1 to 2, repulsion. And they see people of this group as strange, sick, crazy, aversive. 3 or 4 is a little bit better. It's pity. LGBT people are somehow born that way, and isn't it sad? Um, 5 to 6 is tolerance. Life for LGBT people is hard. Anti-LGBT attitudes just make things worse, and we should tolerate this group. Um, 7 to 8 is acceptance. LGBT individuals are a fact of life, and should neither be punished nor celebrated. Um, 9 to 10, support. The rights of LGBT people should be protected and safeguarded. 11 to 12 is admiration. Being LGBT in our society takes strength. Um, that one's a little bit tokenizing, if you ask me. Um, level 13 to 14 is appreciation. There is value in diversity. Anti-LGBT attitudes should be confronted. And in 15 to 16 is nurturance. LGBT people are indispensable part of society. And I pulled this from um, Fire and Companies 2024 piece on bias towards the LGBT community by us Australasian paramedicine students. Um, and so I went and found a source on it because that helps my brain remember things. Um, but this level of repulsion through nurturance, and where are we on that thing, and how are we adjusting our own attitudes so we can move up on the scale towards a higher number, towards nurturance, towards being actively affirming and nurturing of these communities that are different from us. And as I was thinking about this episode, the story that I actually thought of was I used to be involved with the Miss Trans New England pageant when it happened here in Western Mass. I would just go to their events and hang out with the folks, and it was great. And these wonderful women and folks involved with the pageant, they didn't want me to be trans or non-binary. They just wanted me to be whoever I was. And to have the chance to explore my own understanding of myself, whatever that looked like. And so if I showed up dressed mask, like in a masculine way, they were supportive of that. But if at the very next event I showed up in a dress and heels, they were supportive of that, right? However I expressed myself, they were supportive of that. Um, and they really worked on, like, there was a way that the people in that community worked to build a community. I wasn't there contingently as a guest. I was there as someone who was missed. If I didn't show up, people reached out.
Mhm.
Like, hey, where were you? We were hoping to see you at this event. Will you be there next time? Do you need a ride? Like, making sure that people are able, not just invited, but able to get there if they need assistance doing so. A lot of uh like church communities will have like a van
Mhm.
that'll go pick people up. Or I know that when in high school, when I was going to pride events, and early college when I was going to pride events, I had access to a vehicle. And so I would go and pick folks up to go to the events because it was a way that I
Right.
could embrace and nurture our community building.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
An organization that I'm aware of that, at least in my experience, and granted, this is probably not the case universally or everywhere, but a lot of what you're describing is to me the difference between 12-step fellowship groups and a lot of other organizations. I've been sober for a little over 16 years now. And, in my experience, 12-step groups, if you say, hey, I really want to go to a meeting, but I need a way to get there, somebody will come and pick you up, right?
Yeah.
Somebody will find a way to get you there. Somebody will, if you walk into a meeting and they ask, are there any newcomers in the room tonight? And you have the courage to put your hand up, you suddenly become the most important person in the room, right? Um, and I often have thought that other organizations would do well to practice that kind of positive, inviting, welcoming, going out of our way on behalf of the person we don't know yet.
Yeah. I love that you use the word yet. Person we don't know yet. Um, I think a lot of this podcast is, it's not necessarily even for the people you do know right now. It's the people you don't know yet, but whom you could have beautiful relationships with, beautiful friendships with, that you don't know yet because you either haven't approached or they haven't approached, and having the conversation as to how can we make both sides, all sides rather, because binaries do not exist, more approachable and more affirming. Um, and I think that's something that we should, as community members, look into in the communities we belong in.
Yep.
Uh, and I think that kind of is a nice transition. The second piece that I've been pulling from, and you can tell I'm an academic in some sorts, right? It's because I have citations, though this one is sort of a citation of Ahmed, definitely, but sort of a citation of myself because I just pulled the excerpt from my dissertation. Um, and it's from Sara Med's piece on being included, racism, and diversity in institutional life. And she had written, I wrote, Ahmed discusses the concept of welcoming people as integral parts of a community or welcoming them contingently as guests, with guests being people who are allowed in a space, but who are not of that space, who are not integral to the existence of that space and would not be missed if they were suddenly no longer there. She articulates that people who are a part of a space, who are of a space, should not have to be gracious and grateful to be there. Their presence should not only be welcomed but expected, their absence marked as an egregious error to be actively corrected. I'd love your response to that.
That is beautiful. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it it's got me, my brain immediately like shifted into overdrive, in part because we do a community meal every Thursday night. And basically the deal is if you show up here at 5:15 on a Thursday night, you're going to get fed. Period. Like, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter how you found out about us or where you came from or anything else. If you show up at about 5:15 on a Thursday, you're going to get fed. Um, Now, one of the things that we do in our own talking about that, in our own thinking about that, et cetera, is that we refer to the people who come to the meal as guests, in part because that sort of drives our practice of hospitality, right? And now, and I'm not saying we need to stop calling folks guests, but I think that's like the other side of the coin of what she's talking about as guests, where you can treat somebody as a guest in such a way that, they're allowed in the space, but not of the space. Like, you know, calling someone a guest can be a signifier that we are going to go out of our way to be intentionally welcoming, or it can be othering in such a way that, draws a line and says in the space, but not of the space. So like that
Yeah.
word can play in two different ways. But I love what that part about people who are of a space should not have to be gracious and grateful to be there. Their presence should not only be welcomed, but expected. Their absence marked as an egregious error to be actively corrected. That is, I'm going to be like sharing that in the communities where I have leadership responsibilities, because yes, that is such a powerful and succinct expression of something that every church I've ever been a part of has struggled with, right? My denomination, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, was founded in 1988 from a merger of a bunch of predecessor churches. And since 1988, we have had a stated goal to become more racially diverse, and with the goal of being at least 10% people of color. 38 years later, we are still the whitest denomination in America. Over 96% Northern European
Yep.
ancestry. And I used to think that that was mostly about institutional racism. And I don't think it is. Don't get me wrong. There is definitely a layer of institutional racism that is behind that. But I think more so there's a failure to recognize this thing about um, their absence marked as an egregious error to be actively corrected, right? We've just thought that by saying everyone is welcome, well, that's enough. And it's not, particularly when dealing with communities, when attempting to um, include communities that have been marginalized and have been excluded and have been rejected. It's not enough to just say all are welcome here. You have to look at their absence as an egregious error to be actively corrected. Um, and that's again, it's a different thing. It's no longer passive. You have to make it a stated goal followed with concrete action to say, we are intentionally going to go and invite whoever, people of color, because we need to learn from our neighbors of color, right? We need to learn from
Yeah.
our siblings who are people of color. We're going to make it our intentional goal to go out and meet and get to know and learn how to support our LGBTQIA plus siblings, because we need to learn from them. Like,
Yeah. So
We're
can I
not.
pause you for
Yeah.
a second?
Hmm.
I think my question, as someone who has done some of this work, is how do we do this without tokenizing people?
Right.
So, for example, is there a predominantly Black or a predominantly like people of color church in your area that your church can build a relationship with?
Exactly.
Is there an LGBT group where you can, like, as a pastor, can say, hey, I want to, I was wondering if I could talk to your group about what did they need? Or like you have a table at Pride coming up. Um, Asking people, hey, if you wanted to attend church, what would help you feel more wanted there, welcomed there, more like you belong there?
Right. And I think that is an extremely key piece because we have a bad habit of saying, well, we need you to come here to prop up our organization, right? We need to get more butts in the pews or whatever. And instead, approaching this from the standpoint of we are less than who we should be because we have failed to actively invite and welcome and affirm and nurture you.
Yeah.
And we are trying to correct that. And whether you ever come and sit in our pews or not in a church context, like, change the language for whatever organization you're a part of, whether you ever come and sit in our pews or not, we would like to have the benefit of your wisdom because you see things in the world that we just don't.
Yeah.
And approaching it from a standpoint of how can we be of service? How can we care for and nurture you? And recognizing that in doing that, in asking those questions, that's the benefit that we get. The benefit that we get isn't that, those folks come and be a part of our community. Just simply knowing some things that we didn't know before is what we get out of it.
Yeah. Um, so something that comes to mind here for me is before I even got kicked out of the church that was not a church, um, more of a, you know, group
Really
think
gross. Yeah.
organization. Um, I went to a pride prom, which, mind you, that church that was not a church said I should not go to, because gay was wrong. Um, and there was a pastor there, and I spent the whole night going back and forth with him. You can't be gay and Christian. You can't. And he's, but you can. And I'm like, but you can't. They told me you can't. And he gave me his card at the end of the night. And 6.5 months later, when I got kicked out, I sent him an email and I said, I got kicked out and I don't know what to do because I need a community. And that's the whole reason I was out of church to begin with. It wasn't necessarily my faith, it was I wanted and needed a community. Um, and he said, okay, well, our next service is at this date and time. Do you have a way you could get there? And I'm like, I don't think I do. And he goes, okay, well, give me a week because it was a couple weeks out. That organization only met once a month at that point. And he got back to me in 2 days and said, someone will be at your house at this time or at whatever location you feel safe as being picked up at this time. And they will bring you to church and we will make sure you get home safely. And he didn't, yes, he was there at that Pride prom to say, like, hey, like, this is an affirming space. If you want to explore your faith at the intersection of faith and orientation or identity. But he didn't necessarily expect to meet, like, there wasn't a payoff for him. Me emailing wasn't, a matter of convenience for him.
That wasn't his goal.
No. Um, but he made sure that I knew if I wanted to be there, they wanted me there. And that goes back to what we were saying at the beginning of the episode, right? Um, and so I think looking at the Riddle scale, looking at the quote and excerpt, the quote from Ahmed, the excerpt from my dissertation about that quote, we look at allyship as what can we do to do better? And part of that starts with learning. And it starts with learning from people who have already shared the work. So you don't need to go ask Bob Jones
Right.
down the street, who is part of X demographic. You can read a book or watch social media videos from someone who fits the demographic of or the group you are trying to learn about or learn from. And so there are ways to do it that aren't tokenizing, that meet your needs as someone who wants to know better so you can do better and help you learn what you can put into place so that when people start coming, if people start coming and when people start coming, they're already in place. They're not an afterthought. We've already shoveled the ramp.
Right. Right.
We've made,
Like,
yeah,
you know, so here, um, we don't have any trans folks who are regularly active worshiping members of the community. Okay. But we do have an all gender restroom so that if a trans person comes, there's a place if they're not comfortable with a gendered restroom, right? And like, seriously, when we talked about hospitality and we had a trans woman who was helping us figure some of this out, and she was saying, and it's helpful if you can make sure that folks are able to find it without having to specifically ask, because that can be an awkward and uncomfortable thing. Our property guys, property folks, because it's a mixed group, I should get out of the habit of saying guys. Boy, they took that hospitality piece on board, because you can't walk into this building without seeing the signs with the arrows saying all gender restroom and like the arrow pointing like for you to get there, right? Which, I mean, it's good because you kind of got to work to get there, but you definitely don't have to ask to find out how.
yeah.
So, um,
And
and and
those,
and some of our members, some of our long lifelong Lutheran members are like, well, why do we have to have those signs everywhere? I'm like, again, put yourself in the shoes, my dude. Like, walk a mile in somebody's shoes. If you rolled into this place for the first time and you needed that particular facility, would you want to have to walk up to somebody and ask for it? Oh, yeah.
yeah, inclusive bathrooms don't just benefit trans people.
Mm-hmm.
They like parents with children of a different gender who, and those children still need help going to the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
People who are disabled and who have caregivers with them.
Oh my
Parents who need
gosh.
to pee and the children don't need help, but they have to watch said children.
As a divorced dad, when my two daughters were, 6 and 4, or, 8 and 6, and we were out in public, a non-gender specific or a gender inclusive bathroom was a godsend, right? It's not just for those people, whoever those people are, right? Um, and and the other thing is, like, is it hurting you any? Is it costing you anything to make this available? No, it's not.
Oh, I watched a video with Miriam Margoyles, I think is her name. I reposted it yesterday on TikTok. And she was talking about how she was like very firm on grammar. They is plural. And she spoke with a trans actress at some point, and the actress was like, it's not just, does it hurt you in some way? No, it's, it brings that person peace, joy, access, basic needs being met, and a comfort in your basic needs being met. Um, and it's not hurting you. And even if it did hurt you, what is it hurting? Um,
Is the cost or the quote unquote harm to you outweighed by the good to the other?
yeah,
Which, especially for those of us who claim to be Christians, the
yeah.
needs of the other is like really supposed to be one of our primary concerns. I think some famous guy said that. It sounds familiar.
Um, I sense some sarcasm. It's almost like it's your love language.
It's certainly one of my spiritual gifts.
All right. I'm going to move us forward into put it into practice. And today we want you to consider your own experience on being included and or welcomed into a space where parts of who you were or were not heavily represented. And we'd love you to respond in the comments with what is something a person or organization did to help you feel like all of you wasn't just okay to be there, but like you belonged, like you were of that space. And what is something a person or organization did that might seem small to people outside of your identity group or just outside of you, but that felt big to you? Um, and to kind of wrap it up, today we leave you with a question. What does it look like to feel welcomed, not as a guest, but as an integral part of the communities you engage with? And what does it look like to welcome others in that same way? Um, do you have anything you want to add before we close out?
Did you mean to skip story time?
Yes,
Okay,
time.
that's fine.
Um,
I
yeah.
that
Did you
is a
have a
complete
story?
uh, I do, but it's not that important, and it's not a mind-blowing example. So like we can move on. I was just curious.
Yeah. Um, I felt like we had told some of the stories already. Um, so this has been the Affirming Practice Podcast, and I'm glad you were here. If you have questions you're hoping we could help answer or situations you want advice on, leave it in the comments or click the link in the description/bio that says ask your questions here for anonymous ways to ask. Bob, I know you have a way you want to leave.
I just want to make sure that people remember that they matter, that they are valid, that they are precious, and above all, I hope that they will remember that they are indeed deeply and profoundly loved.
Until next time, remember to take care of yourself because you're too important not to.
And so do
Bye.
you.